Well, welcome everyone. Good evening. And I'm sorry, this first slide is incorrect. Who in the world put this thing together? This is Evenings with the Routt County Master Gardeners, and today is actually session 2. It is April 21st, 2020. We've got a great lineup this evening. We're going to do salad bowls. We're going to look at perennials, how to divide perennials, and season extension. So welcome. Hope that you all got outside today because it was a gorgeous day. Enjoy a little sunshine, maybe clean up a little of your own yard so you're ready to put into action some of the things we're going to learn about tonight. So some video conferencing etiquette for tonight. I want to remind everyone that we, of course, live in rural America, and that means that our internet can be good or it can be bad. So if you have a bad connection, please remember that our presentation will be recorded and posted on the Routt County Extension website. So if you've missed something, please feel free to go back there and watch that. The hosts, which are myself and Andy Kennedy this evening, thanks to Andy for helping out with that. I appreciate that. We will disable your audio and your camera as much as we can because there's just an awful lot of things going on. We'll have probably 100 or so people on tonight if last week was any indication or more. So it can be distracting if too many videos are on, and we will use the chat box for questions. So look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you'll see a little call out similar to the one shown there, but it's a square now in Zoom. It used to be round, but now it's square. You can type your questions in there, and we will moderate those and get those questions in for you. If you see something in the chat that is being presented, a link or something of that nature, we'll talk about that in a moment. Don't click on that link unless myself or the presenter tell you that it's okay to click on that. Remember that this is a class and presentation, so we know that there's other things going on at home, but please try to pay attention because we don't have time to answer a lot of questions that we've already answered. So make sure that you're paying attention if you're going to ask questions. And then importantly, very importantly, you can read here, if you need closed caption of tonight's presentation, please email us at the Master Gardener website or email, and we will get that to you. This will be on YouTube. It will be closed caption, but if you need it closed caption, we'll want to make sure that that closed captioning is cleaned up a little bit so it makes more sense to you. Now, this is an addition from last week. Just so you know, Zoom bombing, or this is someone who is not part of the group, not here to learn about gardening, gets into Zoom and then does something inappropriate. This has happened to some other events in Extension and outside of Extension. So to make sure that this doesn't happen to us, we want you to note these things, that we are keeping you muted. And again, we are keeping your video off. And we use that chat feature. And again, as I said, if there are links in there that somebody puts in, don't click on those unless myself or the presenter who's presenting to you tells you that it's okay to click on that, because we don't want someone who shouldn't be putting links in that chat box feature to put those there and then send you someplace that you don't want to be. If there appears to be a participant on this call this evening that is causing issues, Andy or myself will remove them from the event. And if there's something that should appear on your screen that does not appear like it's part of an evening with the Master Gardeners, which is a evening dedicated solely to wholesome gardening, if you see something that's not correct and we're not seeing it, let us know, but we'll probably see it. We will shut down the event immediately and ask you all to rejoin via the same link that you've used to join us already in 10 minutes. So again, we'll shut everything down, join us in 10 minutes, and we'll start all over again. If there are no questions, Andy, I can't see my chat. Are there any questions that people have about that?
There are no questions as of yet, Todd.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So that means we're going to get started this evening with my dear friend, Jackie Baratovich. Now, any of you who were on with us last week got to enjoy Jackie's presentation on seed selection. She did a spectacular job, and you know that she is an expert master gardener. Trained in Boulder in 2003, Jackie has, she spent 10 years as a master gardener down there before she joined us in Routt County, moving here 7 years ago and joining our Master Gardener program. She was born to a family farm near Fresno, California, where her family and great-grandparents immigrated and grew table grapes. So very cool. She was in 4-H, and she's a fan of Extension, and we are a fan of Jackie's. And this is a great picture. You can see what she's going to talk about. So Jackie, we're going to turn it over to you to talk to us about salad bowls.
Thanks, Todd. Salad bowls. Yum. Look, you can just clip the little leaves. It's the best thing. Salad bowls are a super fun project. If you're stuck at home with kids or grandkids, it's an easy project to do. It engages the kids. It teaches planning and patience. And I wouldn't call it instantaneous gratification, but it's pretty quick gratification because from that initial picture of me watering and this guy about 4 weeks ago. And I started a whole bunch of them, partly because I kept taking videos of this presentation and I just got more and more of them. And now we are eating them every night. So you only need a couple of things. You need a container that drains. You need potting soil, appropriate seeds, and optionally some plastic wrap, and I'll show you why, and grow lights or a good south-facing window. So your container selection is pretty easy. It can be shallow, it can be fairly small. The roots on the seeds that you're going to plant are only 2 to 4 inches long, but it needs to drain because these little greens don't like to have wet feet all day long. They like to be moist, but not sitting in water. Also, if you are going to use a pot that's stored over winter, like in your garage or underneath the eaves, what I do is I rinse it out and then I spray it with bleach and let it sit for 10 minutes or until it's dry, and then I rinse it again just to kill any wee beasties that you don't want to bring an insect in. Okay? All right, Todd. I've got greens in my teeth now. So I would suggest that you go out and you purchase some potting medium. The potting soil is not really soil like you would find outside. It's really more of a medium. It's a combination of 3 or 4 ingredients, and none of them are really what you would call soil or dirt. There's moss or coconut husks ground up, vermiculum. And when you go to get this, you will find lots and lots of bags of different kinds of soilish things. Planter's mix, garden soil, compost, amendment, none of those work for this. Potting soil that is specific to container gardening is very fluffy. So it absorbs water well, it does not compact, it's very aerated so that oxygen can get to these, this is a very tightly packed set of seeds, and it needs a lot of oxygen to the roots. So you don't want to go and dig up your local soil either unless you can really well amend it. It's just got too much clay in most cases. Even the decomposed granite that's in some parts of our valley won't work that well for container gardening. Now you can make your own. You can just Google homemade potting soil. But looking at the ingredients, by the time you go out and buy all the different ingredients that go in potting soil, it's less expensive just to go buy potting medium. You'll see that there are organic and inorganic selections, and the difference in the two is that the organic is going to have a naturally occurring fertilizer in it, like blood meal or bone meal or sterilized chicken manure. It's not going to be chemical based. And when I did all of these, where I went to buy my soil, all they had was just that Scott's Miracle Grow conventional potting soil, and it was on sale. I got a bag. I'm not bothered, but if that's your sensibility, then that's what you would go and look for. So we talked about this last week. What you want for these container gardens are some cool season greens or herbs with short growing days, because that's going to determine your immediate feedback, and a wide soil germination temperature range. Why? Because while your soil outside, and I've been watching mine, is more like 45 to 50, depending on if it's in a container or in the earth and how much sun it's been getting, the soil in your house is going to be your house temperature. So it's going to be closer to 70 degrees probably, or 65. And this pot and patio blend, which is I think what's in this little container I've got on my table, the soil range there is 40 to 75 and 2 to 15 days to germinate. So that's a great selection. And again, we don't recommend any particular brand of anything. I just happen to like this particular brand of seeds that I like their catalog, so that's what I used. And sure enough, 2 days after I planted these, they were all poking their little seedling heads up. So one thing you want to do is notice the seed depth. So on the right-hand side, which is the back side of the seed packet, way over on the left, you can see it says 1/8 inch. Next. So one thing, a little project you might want to do with kids is you may look at the different seeds you get. So I had, when I ordered my seeds, I got a container braising mix, which is a bunch of different kales. And those seeds are a different family than lettuce, and the seeds are round. So you put them in your hand, or you put them like on this card I have, and they roll all over the place. So that's kind of fun with kids. And then lettuce seeds are kind of long and very light, and they will, if you've got the doors open and it's windy, they'll fly away and germinate somewhere else. So it's a great research project to ask your kids, so how do you think these seeds are created? Where do they come from? And what does the shape tell us about the type of plant that's going to grow? Okay. All right. Now it's video time. So this picture was maybe one to 2 weeks after I planted what you saw in my first picture, which I took last Sunday. So let's do it. So the first thing you're going to do is take your container and fill it to within 1 inch to 1/2 inch from the top with your potting soil. And then you're going to water it thoroughly. You don't need to refill it. It does not, like I said earlier, it doesn't compact that well. All right, do the video, Todd. So now we're ready to plant. I have a container prepared with potting soil that is saturated. And I'm going to take my seeds, and I'm going to use for this one, because I have so many others, arugula seed that I saved. And I know that arugula seed depth is 1/4 inch. So I'm going to take some potting soil, cover it with 1/4 inch. No cat on the potting table. And then I'm going to use a spray bottle rather than, say, putting it underneath the kitchen sink or my watering can, because this won't disturb those seeds and make them float around. Get that nice and wet. And then one thing I really like to do when I'm starting a salad bowl or any seedlings is to put everything in plastic. I just happen to have this plastic bag, but you can also use plastic wrap. This just keeps the soil nice and moist until the little seedlings are established. And in a very short amount of time now, you will start to see the little seeds germinate and the seedlings come up. And when they're pushing against the plastic, just take the plastic off, and now you can watch things grow. So harvesting, a couple things you can do is you can harvest individual mature leaves.
You missed.
Or you can take a whole handful in one of your salad bowls and mow it and have what costs a lot of money at the market for baby greens. What do you think, Aspen? Fresh salad for dinner?
Yummy.
That's great. That was my 14-year-old video assistant and our cat, who likes to be the center of everything. So just to summarize, you can just spread those seeds as close as you want, lots closer than the spacing recommendations on the seed packet, and then cover them with the amount of soil indicated by the seed depth on your seed packet. I'll cover that cornbread and chili. So again, you want to spritz at first, and if you're not going to put it in plastic, just spritz it a couple times a day. You don't want to let the top dry out too much because the seedlings won't do well. And it's really, really fun. So I am using just standard office or garage lighting, and those are aquarium balls or bulbs, just standard fluorescent bulbs that are made for an aquarium. They're a little more expensive than your 40-watt bulbs. And we get a lot of light in the solar house that I live in, but I just find that everything grows straight up if I've got light under it. And then I've got it on a timer for 14 hours a day. And if we're going to have like the next, like today and yesterday, or today and tomorrow will be fairly sunny, I might set my timer to turn off midday, only because I get so much indirect light here. So we would love to see what you and your kids, or maybe just you by yourself, do for a salad bowl. It is, like I said, it's amazing. So any more questions?
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. That is so much fun.
It's a lot of fun. Let me look at chat. Aw. I think you had your plastic on too long, Karen.
So let's repeat for those who can't read this.
Oh, sorry.
Karen says, I started some seeds and they came up at about 2 inches. They wilted and died in the southeast window, covered with no plastic.
Oh,
What's
covered
the likely cause?
with plastic. Yeah, I think plastic. You might have had your plastic on a little too long, and there's just not enough oxygen getting to the roots. That's a guess.
And then Jackie Terry's asking, how much light, if you're in a condo and you can't do grow lights, is there another way to create
Well,
light enough?
set them in a south facing or a southeast, southwest window. North will be a little more challenging. It'll probably slow things down, and then just keep turning it. You know, every time if you see everything start to reach toward the window, turn it, turn it. And so I found that the compact fluorescent bulbs, if you've got a desk lamp, that puts out a fair amount of light that plants will use. You can just put that desk lamp, not an incandescent, a fluorescent, put it right on top of it and see what happens.
And then Jackie, I don't know if you saw up above, Russell was asking, does anyone know where to get arugula seeds? And I know there was an answer put in there.
Arugula?
Jackie, yeah.
Well, Russell, I have a handful. You could probably have, we could arrange that, because I don't know how much more I'm going to plant of arugula. Everywhere that's selling food generally has seeds this time of year, including Walmart and Ace. And I have heard that a lot of seeds are sold out. I have heard that some of the seed companies have just kind of shut down their shipping. I know that the folks that I like to use have gotten very slow. But I would try, I have seen them in natural grocers. I've seen them in City Market, Walmart, Ace, and Windermere opens on May 1st. And if you can't find them there, you might call to Craig and call the Cabela's and MJK and see if they've got seeds.
And I see that Allie has noted that Natural Grocers has seeds. Burpee is still allowing orders. And I will note that Flat Tops Farm and Ranch Supply in Phippsburg just got theirs in as well. So there's a little answers for everybody. Great questions, everyone. Thank you, Jackie.
You're
Always
so
a
welcome.
treat. Appreciate that.
Bye-bye.
So folks, asked this last week, we're just trying to get kind of a feel where everyone is from. So I'm going to pop up here on the screen a poll, and I want you to let me know where you're from. So go ahead. I'm going to hit launch polling. Hopefully you can see that. Andy, can you confirm? Yep, looks like people can see that. Let's see where everybody's from. We've invited folks from all over, and mostly anticipate Routt County gardeners, but like to know kind of who else is here. Now I'm only seeing about 50 of our 90 or so people on there, so take just a moment to vote. Click that, please, real quick.
Todd, I do know for certain that one of my friends who I hung up with right before this call, who lives in the Durango area, is on. So one of those other answers is my friend down there.
Very good. Welcome from Durango. We've got 5 people from another area, and we've got someone tonight from Jackson County. Fantastic. Jackson County, that is a darn hard place to grow. So hopefully it's not all for naught. Hopefully we've taught you a little bit something that can help out. Also want to point out in the chat, if you haven't noticed, that someone just texted Samantha, who's the owner of Elk River Pet and Ranch, and they have seeds too. So this is great. We've got someone from Fort Collins joining. Fantastic. Excellent, everyone. Thank you. Next, I'd like to turn the stage over to my friend Lynn Shattuck Miles. Lynn is someone who gardened all over the Midwest, primarily in Michigan, which is where she grew up. And she comes from a family of production farmers and home gardeners. You can imagine that after she developed this passion for growing plants, especially perennials, as a teen and gardened all of her life in Michigan, that moving to Routt County was a little bit of a challenge. So she took the Master Gardener class in 2016 in order to learn how to grow in our somewhat harsh, high elevation mountain environment. And she says she is still learning. So Lynn, we're going to turn it over to you, and thanks for teaching us about Colorado perennial gardening.
Thank you, Todd. So we're going to talk about perennial gardening tonight. Unlike annuals that only last a single season, perennials come back year after year. So when you look at your neighbor's beautiful garden, you can also often wonder, how did they do that? How did they even know what plants to choose? So a well-established garden can look a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. So we're going to try to break that puzzle down into organized pieces. Can I have the next slide? So the first thing you really want to ask yourself is, what type of garden do I really want? Do I want something that's more formal? Do I want something that's simple? Something that's going to attract pollinators? Do I want to cut flowers? And really, how much time do you want to invest? And most importantly, how much money do you want to invest? Be realistic about your goals. Next slide. And remember, not every single garden can grow every perennial. Every site has its limitations. Many grand garden photos never show you, like this picture, the plants that have failed. So whether you're starting an entirely new garden or you're adding just a few plants to an existing area, your planning is going to be the same. Next slide. So first, you're going to want to choose a location. Is your space flat or is it hilly? Sunny or shady, or is it wet or dry? Does it have good visibility and access? And how available is water? How is it going to blend in with the rest of your landscape? Your location will definitely affect the preparation and your plant selection. Next slide. So you all definitely want to have a plan. You want to determine the size of your garden and consider, how much time do I want to spend on maintenance? You don't want to make something that's so enormous if you only really want to spend about 5 minutes a week taking care of it. Draw out the design that you want to accomplish. Some people like something that's more formal, and some people like something that's random. So using graph paper, draw in the existing elements in the space. That would be the buildings, walls, fences, existing trees, shrubs, and plants. And then eventually, when you've chosen the plants that you want to put into the area, you'll be able to draw those into the plan also, kind of like having a roadmap. Next slide. Next, you're going to want to choose your plants. Always take into consideration the hardiness zone. And Todd talked about this last week. We are zone 4. So you don't want to fall in love with something that's only going to grow in 6 or 8, because it's really just not going to thrive here. And again, is your location, is it sunny or shady? Is it wet or dry? And you definitely want to consider the length of your growing season and the flowering. So in the mountains, when we have a very short frost to frost window, if you choose a perennial that is only going to flower in mid or late fall, you may never see it come to flower. So also want to consider heights, colors, and textures. And so now is your time that you want to draw that into your plan. And you want to also place plants that have relatively similar water requirements relatively close to each other. Next slide. So once you've made those decisions and you have your area chosen, you're going to want to prepare and amend the soil. In an earlier presentation, Todd talked about soil and climate. So in a new site, you're going to want to remove the weeds and the grass. And depending on the space, you're going to have to amend the soil with materials that are going to promote good drainage and also promote plant growth. And one example would also be if you're just planting native plants, which we're going to talk about in a later segment, soil amendment might not even be necessary at all. And if you're just adding a few plants to an existing area, you definitely want to work that soil where the new plants are going to go. Next slide. Once the site is prepared, you want to place your plants in the space. We're often starting with much smaller plants, whether they're in pots or they're bare root. So don't crowd them together. You want to plan for a mature size. The same if you're only adding a plant or two to an existing area, you want to give them room to grow. And again, place plants with similar water requirements relatively close to each other. Next slide. Finally, the part we've all been waiting for is planting. If the plants are in containers, you want to remove them from the pots and you want to gently loosen the roots a little bit. And the photograph here that you see with the root system, this nice white fleshy looking roots, that is what you want to look for when purchasing perennials. So don't hesitate when you're at a store and you're purchasing something. You can take them out of the pot and take a look at them to make sure that they're healthy. Some gardeners like to swish them around in a bucket of water to rinse off some of the old soil, and it also hydrates the root prior to planting. And you would do the same if it were a bare root plant. And then only replant to the original soil height. Once it's planted, water it in well, and never compress or press the soil down. Piece of cake, right? So some sources for perennials would be going to your local garden center, for example, or online garden catalogs. To stretch your budget, you could get bare root plants from friends and family, and then Plant Select. Plant Select is a cooperation with the Colorado State University at Denver Botanic Garden and our green industry that help to produce and test perennials that will grow well in our climate. So take a look at the website, the Plant Select website. They have design gallery information on where to buy, what's new for 2020. Also take a look at Plant Talk with CSU. And definitely, of course, there's always the master gardeners to refer to. Don't feel that what you have to do is all or nothing. You can start out with just a few plants, and over several seasons, you can add to them or divide them. So for long-term success, you want the right plant in the right place. So choosing perennials that are referred to as native or native adaptive are going to have a better chance of flourishing in our environment. They can be more drought tolerant. So again, a great idea, and this is the Yampa Valley Botanic Garden. Tour your botanic garden for inspiration. Next. So a couple choices that would be, for example, for something in full sun would be our native columbine or sage. Next. It's loading. Native grasses, lavender, yarrow. I like this photograph because all three of these could be in the same garden, and they're so distinctly different in textures and colors. Next one. Penstemon, lupine, or sedum. And again, penstemon, there are over 200 different varieties of penstemon that you can choose from, and almost all of those are native to North America. Now, not every one of them will grow here in the mountains, but you could have a huge variety just in penstemon alone. Next slide. And then lilac and poppies. So there's just a minimal examples of what will grow in the sun. Next slide. For shade gardens, hostas are a fabulous example. And again, here's just two examples out of 80 possible choices in hostas. Next slide. Bleeding hearts are a beautiful one, and they come on relatively early in the summer. Next slide. Ferns and lungwort. And again, ferns, here's two distinctly different ferns that will grow in our environment. Next slide. Brunera, hellebora. Next. Here's two choices of astilbe and coral bells. And both of these come in such an enormous variety that you could fill your garden with that. And the top picture with Astilbe, again, you can see it's surrounded by hostas, so it does extremely well. So remember, go ahead, next slide. The important thing to remember is right plant, right place. And really plant and grow what brings you joy. These 3 photographs are in 3 distinctly different locations in Denver. And all of them show a huge variety of plantings and just how different they can all be. So have fun with it. Yep, and tour the botanic gardens. I think that's the best thing that will help you discover what types of flowers and foliage that you're drawn to. So I hope this has been enough information for you to get you started, because there's a lot of choices out there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Todd.
Excellent. Thank you, Lynn. Questions for Lynn? We're opening up the chat. I see that Holly is noting that opening day for the Yampa River Botanic Park is May 1st. Of course, we're trying to figure out what our social distancing norm will be by then. But certainly the place to go. You are right, Lynn, to figure out what grows here. And Allie points out that that one of those pictures is the Waterwise Garden at Yampa River Botanic Park. Marissa points out that RockyMountainSeeds.org is a great source for seeds.
And no, Andoni, it's not that easy. I amended my garden 5 years ago, and I'm still amending. So yeah, it's never that easy.
Does anybody else have any questions for Lynn that they want to ask about perennials?
You know, the bleeding heart, there's a question about bleeding heart. It can take some early morning sun, but if it's in the afternoon, it's a little too tough for it. So something that's a little more filtered.
And I'll point out too, we'll probably talk about this in our native plants.
Yeah.
Columbine were mentioned sunny, and some people say, well, they have to be in the shade. The trick with columbine, they can be in sun or shade, but the roots need to be kept cool.
They need to be kept moist and cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So columbine certainly can be a sunny, loving plant, sun-loving plant, and great for sunny location as long as those roots are kept
and they can reseed the heck out of things.
You bet.
Yep.
Oh, and here's some more questions. Shine is asking, how do you deal with burrowing animals in the perennial garden? Do you want to take that on, Lynn? Or?
You know, I know some people who, if it's small enough, they do the wire mesh down below or weed barrier, and they get it down far enough. I personally haven't had a lot of trouble with it, but mine is 80% shade, so mine is slugs. So there's not a lot you can do other than even putting out rodent traps. I hate to say it, but yeah.
And it's interesting you say that, Lynn. People ask about voles all the time. Really, a traditional snap trap, maybe covered with a little cardboard tunnel so other animals don't get into it, but placed perpendicular to that runway, and baited with peanut butter or oats or something of that nature is a great way to take care of voles. And Lynn's absolutely correct. Those little mesh baskets that you can put your perennials in and or your bulbs. Think about that as you plant those. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way to do bulbs.
Jackie says, meow. Make sure we say don't use poisons in your garden where other animals could get to them. Lynn, someone wants to know about any tricks you have. Harvey wants to know about tricks you have for growing columbine from seed.
You know, they seed themselves, and I have to say I haven't had any great success growing them from seed and transplanting them. So I cheat a little bit and buy it already existing plant and then let them do their thing. So, because they will get a toehold just about anywhere and spread.
Karen wants to know, Lynn, if you have any recommendations for deer deterrent.
Deer are tough. I had a lot of experience with that with them in Michigan, and they actually do make a product that is called Deer Off, and it actually does work. It is very obnoxious smelling to put it on. You also have to reapply it every single time it rains. So the only other thing I used was I had what's called the Scarecrow. And it's a water device that is got a motion sensor on it that every time something would walk by it, it turns itself on and would squirt out about a cup of water very quickly, kind of like a lawn sprayer. And that would keep them away. But other than that, you put out the salad bar and they're going to show up.
That's right. It's an all-you-can-eat
It's
buffet, Lynn.
that you're putting out something that they're like, ooh la la. Yep.
Susan asks Lynn, she said she loves the look of grasses, but wants to know how you would plant it so it doesn't take over.
You know, ornamental grasses, fortunately, are fairly slow growing for the most part. But yes, you do at some point have to divide them. So depending on how big you want it to get, and sometimes too, they will become what I refer to as bald in the center. And then that's another moment that you're going to want to take a spade and pull them apart. But they're tough. They're easy to divide and you can't really do any harm to them. It's grass. So that's about the only way you can keep them controlled.
Absolutely. Someone wants to know when to start planting for North Routt.
You know, the soil's got to warm up. That's the whole thing. You got to have that soil probably around what, 65 degrees, 60 degrees. So if it's in the shade, it's going to take longer.
And I will say to Mountain Soap, who asks that, it also depends on what you are planting. Some of these native perennials, certainly you can get in earlier. And then you have to be real careful, of course, with some of your vegetable plants that you're choosing. Some other notes here. Georgie Ann says, of course, plant deer-resistant plants, which actually is an excellent idea. Ellen, who's a master gardener, says put chives around the garden or lay down mint between rows of veggies with some success. Antonia wants to know, Lynn, if there's any particular ornamental grasses that work well here.
I think you just kind of have to experiment with them. I mean, I see them all around town. So Windermere's carries a nice variety of them. I think you just have to go over there and take a look and see what style that you like, what height you want to deal with. They come in all different heights and colors. So pretty much anything that they're going to be carrying is going to work here. And again, you can take a look at the Plant Select website and see what they recommend.
Excellent. And I should go back. I should point out that Marissa asked if we had any advice on transplanting wild iris seed pods.
Wow, I have no idea.
And Marissa, I would say that some of those, I assume you're talking about the little blue iris that grow here out in hay meadows. I think it might be better to try to dig those up and transplant those once they've gone into dormancy than to try by seed. That'd be my recommendation. And I would also note that once in a while people think that there's a yellow flag iris that spreads aggressively. It's actually a noxious weed. Make sure that that is not the iris that you are trying to plant. Other neat things in the chat, I'll let everybody else look those over. I do want to point out, Andoni says, a 12-foot fence works to keep deer out, and isn't that the case?
Yeah.
Lynn, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Todd.
So much appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Stay healthy.
Absolutely. And if you've got further questions about perennials or for Lynn, don't forget to email csumgprogram@co.routt.co.us. Millie noted in the chat that she was starting dividing perennials. Millie, what a great segue into our next section, which is by Pat Tormey. Pat is going to talk to us about dividing perennials, and she moved to Steamboat just 6 years ago, 2014, and she quickly learned after she moved here that raising plants in this environment is very difficult compared to where she raised them in the Midwest growing up and spending most of her adult life. She took the Master Gardener class here in Routt County in 2015 and has enjoyed learning more about gardening every year since. She is now really in charge of, if you will, the Weed Dig It project, which we'll talk a little bit at the end of her presentation. But really, she says the truth is she just loves cheap and free plants. So that's how she got into perennial dividing and sharing plants. A quote that she found from Cornell, actually, that she loves, the quote is, "Many home gardeners have found that the process of division is more traumatic to them, the gardener, than it is to the perennial." Pat's unable to join us live tonight, so what she did, she sent us her presentation, The Dividing Perennials, Fear Not, and we actually videoed Pat, so she's going to be joining us via video. Then Jackie and myself will answer questions that you might have afterwards. We want to thank Michael Burns, who's our videographer. That's his contact information there, which will be available also after the video. So if you like what you see, give Michael a shout out. So a couple of notes before we start the video. Some of it may be a little hard to hear. They were on a, I can't say busy street because this was taken here just a week ago when people are physically distancing. So Oak Street was pretty quiet. This was done at the former Cloverdale restaurant or Low Country restaurant at the corner of 9th and Oak. But it's a little hard to hear. There's some cars come through, so turn your volume up. We will again answer questions after the video. And I must note, we are not going to be Zoom bombed, I don't think, during this video, but would tell you that viewer discretion is advised. If you have a sensitivity to plants getting chopped up, don't watch this video. So we're going to get this on and going right here. Andy, tell me if it doesn't work out.
Hi, I'm Pat, and we're going to talk about dividing perennials. Generally speaking, when you have a perennial, do not be afraid. Dig that puppy out of the ground and cut it. First of all, if you're not doing it in the spring, so in the fall, and you have this top growth, cut that top growth off. This is an oregano, and it has a fibrous root system. No taproot like a carrot, just a lot of roots all about the same size. And the reason I'm cutting, this is not a particularly big plant, but it's easy for us to work with. The reason I'm cutting this right now to show you is that it's so simple to do. This is a knife, $1.50 from Lift Up, and we just literally cut the fibrous root system right through, pull it apart, and we have two plants. If you have a very large plant, very large, and I've heard of people taking apart daylilies with chainsaws, if you have a very large plant, you may need to be more aggressive. Now, why do we do this? We do this because plants thrive, perennials thrive, on being smaller. They bloom better, they grow more robust. Sometimes you'll have a plant that will have a very woody center. I've seen this with Siberian iris. You'll have lots of beautiful plants around the edge and the inside will be sort of dead. We want to take those beautiful plants from around the edge, spread them out. Sometimes we want to share with a friend. Perhaps my neighbor wants some of my delicious oregano. I will give her one, I will replant one, or as many as I cut it into. So we have oregano, it has a fibrous root system. We'll put it right there. Okay, here we have a small daylily. Again, we wouldn't probably be dividing this normally, but for the purpose of demonstration, I want to show you the daylily root, which is also considered fibrous, also has a starchy tuberous component. So let's talk about something else while I'm getting this dirt off. And I'm only getting the dirt off for demonstration purposes. Generally speaking, you want to leave as much dirt on the plant as you can because then the roots are more protected. But in the case of this daylily, and daylilies are tough, you probably didn't know this because I didn't know it until earlier this morning. The reason that you see daylilies all over the United States, and especially in the West along the roads, is that these tuberous portions of the stem, or of the root that you can see, are they're a fleshy component of the root that stores nutrients. So this was a plant that the pioneers brought with them on their covered wagons because they knew it would survive extensive periods because of these fleshy roots. But it is, again, just a fibrous root. That's the daylily. This is another fibrous root system, but this root system is at the bottom of a bulb, in this case a chive. And you can see if you have a clump of chives, and they are the easiest thing in the world, judging by everybody's got chives. But if you don't have chives and you have a neighbor who has chives, you can take a bunch of chives from your neighbor, and this soil is a little wet and sticky, so I'm not getting the kind of separation I might like. But you just sort of tease them apart like so, and voila, you have 4 chives plants. They will grow to be huge and beautiful and delicious. This is the last, I think, of the fibrous roots that I have to show you today, second to last. And I have a special reason for wanting to do this one. I'm going to really knock the dirt off, and the reason is that when you have a perennial that's been in your garden for a long time, you may well find that buried in this plant, even though it's not very large, are some hitchhikers that you don't want. So we see this beautiful mass of fibrous roots, and when you get here, look at them and say, yeah, these are healthy looking roots. But what is this? This is grass. This you have to take out somehow from your plant. So normally, if this wasn't so wet and clayey, I would tease it apart to show you. But here, I want instead to separate this thing, and I might even dump it if I had a big bucket of water. Oh, and here's a dandelion in with my alpine strawberry. So you have to tease this puppy apart, or cut it, or whatever, and get all of those things out of there. Generally speaking, the roots, look at this, big white roots. You know, this is not the strawberry root, this is a strawberry root. This is a grass root. So you can see in here if I have a white root, or if I have a leaf that doesn't belong. And then, here's another great thing about alpine strawberries. They break into these little clumps. This is a whole plant. It will, if I put it in the ground and water it and give it some good dirt, it will actually grow this year into a plant that big, and it will give me alpine strawberries. Yum. Now, not every plant has a fibrous root. The ones we've done, easy to do. Sometimes we have taproots. I'm not going to talk about taproots. Think about trying to divide a carrot. You can't do it. So don't worry about dividing taproots. There's other ways to propagate taproot plants. There are plants here that grow very, very well in Steamboat. The iris, which this is the wrong time of year, do not do this. The iris is a rhizome. It has a large root system, and they grow very, very densely when they get older and more mature. And when that happens, when they are all clumped together, big woody mass, they stop producing nice blooms. The flowers will get smaller. You might have some die out in the middle. So you need to dig them up. You dig them up after bloom. You go through a drying process. You replant them, then they will slowly come back over the years. I brought them only to show you this rhizome. It is a bulge on the stem. It is not the same. It is not the same as the fibrous root, the fleshy fibrous root of the daylily. So it's a different creature, and it's treated differently. Now these plants that come from adventitious rooting systems come from non-root things. They come from the stem, they come from a leaf, and one of the ones that demonstrates to you how convenient it is to have this rooting system are almost all of your ground covers. This is a creeping Jenny, and it's last year's growth, but you can see, if you get right in there, I hope you can see, there's a rootlet, and it is at the end of this stem. So the stem, this end came from the mother plant, this spread out, found a good hospitable place, and at this node, it started to grow roots. It could actually grow roots at any of those nodes. And then you would have more plants, you would have a stronger plant. Now we're going to go dig. Now, I said that we usually dig the plants up out of the earth, but sometimes you have a plant that you really, really like right where it is and you don't want to dig it up, but it's getting too big, or your neighbor has begged you to give them an autumn joy sedum, and you say, okay, I have this plant and it's quite large, relatively speaking, because these puppies get big. And it's not healthy for them to be this dense. So I say to my neighbor, hey, no problem. I will leave my plant where it is, and I will cut off, and I'm, being aggressive again, because you can be. Pardon my shadow. If you see, there's a natural division here. First of all, move your irrigation. There's kind of a natural division right there. It's not now 2 plants, but it was 2 plants, or it will be 2 plants right now. Bingo, done. So we have an autumn joy sedum. It was cut off right here. That's okay. Do not panic. Keep as much dirt on as you can. And give it to your neighbor or your friend. Where you've taken it out, get some good fill. Top that up with good dirt. Put your irrigation, if you have it, back in. Put in your mulch. And this plant will thrive. They will both thrive. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pat. I'm sorry that you couldn't be with us this evening, but we appreciate your report from the corner of 9th and Oak. Fantastic. So again, that probably made a few of you squirm, seeing how Pat treated those plants, but really they can handle that. And again, we want to thank Michael for being our videographer, and he did that all free gratis. So thank you, Michael. That was great. So Jackie, I don't know if you're out there and want to unmute.
Yep, still here.
Perfect. Do we want to take this together? Or?
Sure. I think unless we need to go through these, we could just take the questions.
I think that's probably a good idea. Just a quick review so you can read it. In case you couldn't hear some of Pat's comments, perennials do thrive with being smaller, and of course we want to give them that room to grow and bloom, and we want to be able to share those with others, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. So dig it up, tear it up, clear out the seeds and weeds, and move forward. And of course we talked about all these different types of roots and how you break those up. Keeping this up here, so if you need to take notes, you certainly can for a moment, but there are the notes. And then I want to talk just a moment about this project that we referenced. Pat has really taken this project to heart and has helped coordinate the We Dig It project. Millie, I noted that you had said in the previous chat that you were dividing perennials. Millie is probably working at the nonprofit center where Comunidad Integrada and United Way are housed, Dr. Willett's old house at the corner of 5th and Oak. Take a moment there. They're near Mountain Brew and the Avita Hair Salon. They're on the corner of 5th and Oak. Is a gorgeous garden. All of those were perennials that were dug up, divided, and planted there. All free plants. one of our master gardeners had a construction project where part of the gardens were going to be destroyed with an expansion of their home, and all those plants were dug up and moved. And if you have a similar situation, give us a call or email us at that CSUMG program at co.routt.co.us. Let us know if you've got plants that you're willing to share, and we will find homes for them. So, Jackie, the questions, I'm sure they're popping up. We can find them here.
Yarrow, can you divide yarrow in the spring? I would say yes. Mine's not up yet. So any other master gardener have some, or Todd? I would say yes.
I would say yes. I would say I'd be cautious. Native yarrow tends to get weedy. I have my native yarrow coming up. It can be split, and I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of it because it's too much. But some of the, what is that? Moonlight bloom, Jackie? What's that real pretty yellow one? That could be divided pretty well.
Yeah.
Todd, this is Tracy. That's the moonbeam.
Moonbeam. Thank you, Tracy. Moonbeam. Go ahead, Jackie.
Find alpine strawberry plants. I didn't know about them until Pat gave me some, and it's they're amazing. They're far more resilient than conventional strawberries, which do grow here. There's a good fact sheet on them.
And Maribeth, yeah, actually absolutely as Jackie's saying, so lots of strawberries do well here. The alpine really do thrive. They're kind of a native berry.
Tracy, do you know where someone could get alpine plants?
No, but I'll type it in. It's coming to me.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Tracy.
Plants blooms in the fall, divide in the spring. If it blooms in the spring, divide in the fall. There you have it. Thank you, Karen.
And I want to point out for Michelle, we asked about she didn't get to see the division of the iris, but Michelle, it is on our website, and we can try to send that to you as well. Millie wants us to talk about the community garden. Yes, this is a great opportunity to do that. Don't forget that the Roots Community Garden is located between 6th and 7th on Oak. We have 20 community garden plots there, I believe, off the top of my head that are available for rent. There is a waiting list for those, but if you are interested in growing at the community garden, make sure you contact the extension office. And that is where there was a beautiful alpine berry bed there, but it has disappeared. I don't know for the butcher knife construction or what happened, which is too bad. Karen, what else do you see? I'm sorry, Jackie, what else do you see here?
I think we got it.
I think so too.
I think Karen Vale's answers all the rest of the questions. So many thanks to Pat, who braved being out of her house, much to her husband's dismay.
That's exactly right. Doug was a little stressed about that, wasn't he?
Yes, he actually came to watch and kept telling her to put that mask back on. I had to laugh.
So it is fantastic that Pat took the time to do that. We want to thank the folks at Cloverdale too. If you've been noticing the way that garden has grown, matured, and really thrived at Cloverdale, the former Cloverdale location at 9th and Oak, that is in good part due to Pat. She took that on as a personal project and really planted that and has just been a real steward to that spot. So thanks to the folks who own that building now and to Pat. And Millie's pointing out the splitting plants in the alley by the community garden. So behind, this is great, Millie, thank you for pointing that out. Next to the community garden and behind what we call the cabin, which is an annex of the Department of Human Services, there on between Oak and the alley, just west of 6th, are the We Dig It Gardens. Check in with us first before you dig up plants there, but that is where we house and kind of keep those plants that people would lose to construction projects or otherwise, and then share those as we can. Okay, well, thank you all for good questions with that. We're going to switch gears a little bit now, and we're going to kind of leave the perennials and talk more about, we're going to talk about vegetable gardening next week, so don't forget to tune in for that. And I know we've had some questions about soil and making soil in raised beds. We'll talk about that next week with vegetable gardening, but assume you've made your raised bed and you've got vegetables going. You need more than 59 days, which we offer here in Steamboat Springs, and we're going to talk about that next. So we're going to turn this over to Allison Mecklenburg. Allie is a delightful young lady who's got tons of experience with season extension and gardening through multiple ways, but she moved to Steamboat from Fort Collins 7 years ago. And Fort Collins is where she'd fallen in love with farming and plants after an internship in a nonprofit farm there. After moving here in 2013, she was stumped about how to grow anything in what is our very extreme mountain environment. So she took our Master Gardener course in 2015, and she has met her fellow plant lovers and is a wonderful addition to the group. She worked at the home ranch near Clark, is her horticulture supervisor for 3 years, where she learned by trowel and error, as Jackie says, how to truly farm in the mountains. And since then, she's continued to garden both in landscape settings and in small-scale farm settings, and now she's running community cultivation, the community cultivation farm. So we're super thrilled to have Allie doing that project, and she's also maintaining her own personal micro farm. The vast majority of Allison's experience with season extension comes from the perspective of vegetables, but she also worked at the Yampa River Botanic Gardens the last couple of years, and we know Karen Bale is on the line, one of our foremost native plant experts and foremost landscapers in the area. Allie got to work with Karen last summer, so she'd learned heaps and tons about season extension for landscape plants with Karen and at the Yampa Valley Botanic Park as well. So as she notes, everything in these slides she has tried. So Allie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, Todd. So season extension for plant success. Basically, we have to do season extension here to have any of what we want to have grow here. Next slide, please, Todd. So as I say, need I remind you of where you live? You might be wondering, why do I need season extension here? Well, this table should really put an end to that question. This table is a summary of what can be found in the CMG Garden Notes number 749, and that link is at the bottom of the table there. That should work to take you there. It's climate data summary from 1967 to 1997, so it's a little old, but it's mostly still applicable. The average number of frost-free days in the last column there, you'll see that is taken with an average number of days that are at 32 degrees with a 50% chance of frost. So those are not even days that are fully frost-free. So you'll see here in Steamboat, we have about 60. Up in North Routt and Clark, you can really take that back 10 days and probably 10 degrees for the average annual high temperature. I know I've worked up there as well, which I'll address later on. So basically, as we all know, plants are pretty sweet. They can take just water, sunlight, and clean air and turn it into carbohydrates and protein for us to eat. But they need a little bit more sunshine and heat than we can give them here in the Yampa Valley. So what you have to do is harness that heat that you get from the sunshine and really make it work harder for you. So this bucket of flowers is a tribute to what can be grown here, but a lot of these types of flowers and what you want to have grow here need a lot more sunshine and heat than what we can give them here in the Yampa Valley. So read on, reader, for how to do that. So the main points of season extension. First, you have to get to know your space. We talked a little bit with Lynn about this. And so basically, you have to get to know what microclimate you're living in. There's lots of microclimates in the valley. So if you've never had time to study your yard or garden and where the sun falls and how long it does, and if it's windy or when it's windy, now's your time to shine. Secondly is to create a climate. So once you have your area, what I like to say is adapt or die. You have to adapt to your area or your plants are going to die. Tools that you can use to do this include raised beds, hoop houses, caterpillar tunnels, frost cloth. Bed sheets can be used in lieu of frost cloth, which I'll go over later. Tarps and different like heat sinks can help with this too. So Next point is transplants. You want to start with small plants instead of direct seed for the best results for our short season. And lastly is get out there and do it. Next slide, please. So getting to know your space. So studying your space is really the best way to figure out how you're going to work with it. Key factors in any space are wind, which can be a hindrance or a help depending on the plant. It does dry things out faster, which is good and bad. It's not Wyoming here, and it's certainly not Fort Collins. It's much windier there, but we do get a fair amount of wind here. So once you know what your wind direction is and what it's like, you can decide where you're going to put your structure, where you'll put a certain plant, and how you're going to secure that structure if you do a structure. And then water and soil type and temperature are also keys. So some areas of your garden are naturally more dry or more wet. Wet soil is colder soil for longer. So if you don't know what type of soil you have in your garden, I'd encourage you to rewatch last week's episode. Joe did a really great segment on how to test what type of soil you have. But most of us here in the Valley have some type of clay, whether it's a little bit or a lot, we probably have some. So clay, in spite of its many faults, is actually really great at holding water. So that means that you have to water less, but it also means, as you see from the last point, that your soil is going to take longer to warm up. So something to keep in mind when you start to decide where to put your garden bed. And then the best way to adapt to that is to get a soil thermometer. So someone asked how to decide in North Routt when to plant. You want to get a soil thermometer really to know what's going on under there. It might feel warm, it might seem like it's getting a lot of sun, all the snow's gone, but it could still be like 40 degrees under the surface. So soil thermometers can be bought online. You can also use a meat thermometer. It's just fine as long as you rinse it off and wash it off afterwards. But a little dirt don't hurt, right? So you can just stick that into the ground, and if it's about 50 degrees, it's generally okay to transplant stuff into there. 60 to 70 is definitely more ideal, especially for veggies, which is why we're going to talk about how to warm up that soil later on. And then sunshine. Seems obvious, but it's critical to watch your space to know how much sun or shade your garden gets. So there's a link in the presentation that gives you a really detailed description of how to landscape your space, or how to look at the light in your space, I should say. So you basically, if you have a lot of time right now, this would be great, or if you have kids, they can go outside, or you can go outside and start at 7 a.m., look at how long different areas get sunshine in your yard, and then decide how, if it's like a full sun, part shade, or full shade area. Generally speaking, 6 or more hours of sun means that it's full sun. Partial sun is between 4 and 6. Partial shade is between 2 and 4. And then full shade is less than 2 hours of sun per day. Like I said, you can go to that link there and it'll give you a more detailed description of how to do that. And an important point to mention there too is that you don't have to do this for your entire yard. You can do this for one area that you're trying to plant your veggie garden, or trying to plant your prized magnolia bush that you're going to try and grow here in Routt County. Good luck. Let me know if you can do it. But that's how you can kind of narrow that scope a little bit to make it more attainable. So we have mentioned here that the right plant is in the right place is critical. That's kind of the Master Gardener mantra. So as you can see in this picture, this poppy was blooming in a very early time of year on May 12th because it was in the right place. You have to take practice, observation, and ultimately time to decide how to get really good at deciding where the right plant for the right place is. And sometimes it takes adapting after you've already planted something. Sometimes you have to move a plant, transplant it, divide it like Pat just showed us how to do. Or you could have to create a shade structure or create some kind of heat sink for it. And that's all part of this. So creating a climate. So after you've assessed your environment, you have to decide how you're going to adapt to it, adapt or die, right? So creating microclimates is the best way to do this. You can create microclimates for your real heat-loving plants with raised beds, which elevate soil temperatures. How this works is the soil on the Earth's surface takes longer to warm up. If you elevate that away from the Earth's surface and put some extra soil in there, that's elevated away from the Earth's surface, and it'll warm up faster than down on the Earth's surface. Another way to increase your soil temperature even more is to cover up those beds with hoops, plastic and or frost cloth to increase the heat in the actual little environment that you're creating. If you want to create a mini greenhouse, like instead of this frost cloth here, you want to create an actual little heat sink in that local environment, you'll obviously need to use transparent plastic. You can do various types of plastic. Jackie actually talked a little bit about this in last week's episode as well. But if you're just doing it for a night, just for warmth, which I'll show you later on, you can just use a tarp and that's fine. Frost cloth is, so we're about frost cloth. It's this white stuff that's in the picture to your right. It's a really specific product that is woven to be porous, but let light through and dry fast. So that's what makes it kind of a magical product for season extension, because it dries fast, so you can leave it on through a snowstorm, say, and it'll dry out and it won't freeze to your plants. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, but just a note about frost cloth and why it's so special. And then another point is to warm the soil up. You can put black plastic over the soil surface to increase the actual soil's temperature. So if your soil is still not warming up, if you have that soil thermometer in there, it's 45 degrees and you're like, come on, you can put some black plastic over the top of it, warm it up for about a week, and then remove it when you're ready to plant. Or a lot of farmers just leave it on all season, and it helps to actually create a nice heat sink for tomatoes, squash, if you're trying to grow pumpkins, stuff like that. It'll make it warm all season. You just cut a hole where you want to plant. And then lastly, you can create a heat sink in your local area. If the ambient air temperature is still not warm enough, say you have a nice little hoop area or you have your raised bed, but it's next to a real open space where there's a lot of cold air, you can put a bucket of water, or there's some products called walls of water, which we don't endorse specific products as master gardeners, like we said, but those products work really well because they are columns of water that surround the actual plant. And how that works is water during the day absorbs light energy, right? And then those molecules, as they're relaxing at night, give off that energy as heat. So it creates a nice heat sink for your plants. So this is an arrow to the irrigation tank that was a nice heat sink in the hoop house that up at the home ranch. Thanks, Todd. Next slide, please. So here's some visuals for you guys to kind of understand what I'm talking about. So these steel hoops on the left were made with a pipe bender, which is a product that you can buy through any seed company. They're aluminum, I don't want to say PVC, what would that product be called?
It's conduit, electrical conduit typically.
Thank you. So you just bend them and then they make a nice semicircle, and then you can just put them right in the soil like that, and they're actually really sturdy. They stand up on their own pretty much. And then you can put plastic over the top of them, or a frost cloth, or whatever you'd like to. So the spinach in the middle is growing happily on November 21st. I harvested it all winter under the cover of both a large hoop house building, and then I created a little mini microenvironment under that garden bed with some PVC pipes and then frost cloth over the top. So kind of like I was talking about, creating a little mini greenhouse. And then on the right, you see the PVC hoops that from a zoomed out version of how we made those. So those PVC hoops are reinforced on either side with a foot of rebar in the ground. So you can put that rebar in the ground and then slide the PVC over the top of it. And it creates a nice sturdy place for the PVC to be held with. And then you can put your plastic or whatever over the top. And then finally, the red plastic helps warm and ripen tomatoes even faster. So basically how this works, I had to Google this because I didn't really know, but I do know from experience it works very well. So the red light waves get reflected back onto the plant, and then it ripens the tomatoes faster. If you want a more detailed description, Google is your friend, but it really does work. So here's some more visuals of how to do some season extension in a more homegrown way. So on the left is my micro farm at the community garden right next to Will Diggett. So last year, in case you forgot, I'm still trying to forget, but we had a snowstorm on the summer solstice. And so I was trying to save many different tender plants under there. So I used a bed sheet as my frost cloth because I don't have any. And then I put a tarp over the top of it because, as I alluded to in the beginning, bed sheets are fine for frost protection, but they do get wet, and then that can freeze to your plants, and then your plants will die, and that's not what you're trying to do with frost cloth. So the best way to adapt to that is to put a tarp over it if it's going to be a wet night as well, and that works just fine. So, and then on the right is a really ingenious contraption that my neighbor Lindsay Woodall is engineering right now. So at the front, there's a bar where you can lift it up and roll it around. And those wheels on the back will act as a rolling like cart, essentially, so that you can roll it to different areas of the yard while it's sunny. And then that top part is a whole greenhouse contraption that's actually hinged on the other side, which is a really good point. So if you have some sort of greenhouse situation that you're making, and Jackie kind of alluded to this too, you need to be able to vent it, because a lot of times even tomatoes or squash will fry on really hot days here if you just keep them vented the whole time, or covered up the whole time rather. You need to be able to vent them. So that's kind of some visuals for you guys. I guess contact Lindsay. I think she's on here if you're interested about how she made that contraption. And then this is kind of just some showy pictures about what I've grown actually in North Routt, under the cover of hoop houses and various different season extension techniques that we've already talked about. So artichokes, this was actually the last flush of these artichokes that we harvested in mid-October. So those can be grown here in a hoop house with lots of help. The tomatoes, those were with, started indoors, transplanted out really early, covered multiple times under the cover of a hoop house with red plastic, and we harvested those all the way through October. Sunflowers usually die with the first hard frost, but this one lasted well through October. And then broccoli harvested in late November because we had started it inside, transplanted it in mid-July. It grew all season, and then we covered it over and over with extra frost cloth under the cover of a hoop house, and it was ready to harvest in late November. So you definitely can do all of your dreams. You just have to adapt. So the last point I have for you guys about season extension is transplants. So utilizing transplants is truly the best way to get a successful crop of veggies or annual flowers. Perennials are a little bit different, as we kind of talked about with Lynn. It depends on what you are trying to grow. Columbines, obviously, you can start from seed inside. I've started bee balm inside from seed, but the thing with perennials to know too is if you're starting them from seed, a lot of them are biannuals. So their first year growing, they're just going to be green if you start them from seed. So that's something to know. That's all I'll say about that. But the other point to make is that transplants are really a great economical option if you're trying to make your garden for as little money spent as possible, especially if you're experimenting. You can start seeds indoors under lights, like Jackie said, or in a sunny window, and get them ready to be outside sooner. So this is a picture of how we did some season extension up the home ranch as well. So these plants were started as transplants inside under grow lights. We transplanted them out in early May. They got snowed on, we covered them up, helped them out. But then by mid-August, we had full heads of cabbage, full heads of lettuce, different kohlrabis. And that just wouldn't have been possible if we direct seeded outside. We would have been probably waiting till the end of October. So how I kind of calculate when to start transplants. A note on this, I don't endorse this seed company, but it is one that I use. So this is a yellow brandywine tomato. So how you can decide how to start transplants is you'll look on the back. There's information about when you want to start these seeds. Typically, they'll give you an idea. So this one says start inside 5 to 6 weeks before your last frost. So generally speaking, if you are doing everything right, like I just showed you, and making a little hoop house, or you have a neighbor who can cover your plants in case of snow or whatever, then I use May 15th as my frost-free date for Routt County. I see Todd's eyes bugging out. Yeah, and that's if you're going to be really aggressive. If not, if you're going to be more realistic, June 1st is an okay one to go by. June 15th if you're living in North Routt. But that's, it can be kind of depressing. So at any rate, you'll take that date and then work backwards from however old they say the transplant should be at time of planting. And then that's when you want to start your plants inside. So if that makes sense, clear as mud, hopefully. But that's kind of how I created my garden and spreadsheet. So with all of that said, now is the time to start your seeds inside. It's not too late. Even if you haven't started your tomatoes already, you definitely still can. Start to build garden beds and season extension add-ons. Map the light in your garden or yard. One of those. And get excited about the long summer and growing season you're going to have. You've got this. And that's it. What questions do we have? We have lots of questions coming in.
Lots of great comments. People are thrilled.
Oh, wow.
Those pictures were exactly what we needed right now, Allison.
I know. Isn't it so fun to think about all the veggies you guys are going to grow? It's going to be so exciting.
Did you know that Christine added with grow lights how to keep plants from getting too leggy, but Jackie answered that. Do you want to say more about that, Allison?
No, I don't. I know that. So a word about that, I guess, is I would not be too concerned. If your things are leggy, when you transplant them, they will start to be normal, because when they're outside in full spectrum light, they will start to adapt to their environment. My squash right now under lights, they're so leggy and they're like bending over and flopping over, but they will be fine when I put them outside, as long as they're the right age when I put them outside, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Other questions for Allison, folks? Put it in the chat box if you have something for her.
Okay, so Steve Mecklenburg, my father, says, can microclimates be a side of a building, or are they just south or north facing? So yeah, that microclimates can be kind of anywhere. You can create them to be whatever you want them to be. So if you have a north facing microclimate, you can actually grow certain shady stuff there. You can grow hostas, or I'm kind of blanking on what veggies are more shade loving. Todd?
Gosh, well, if it's in the heat of the summer, you could grow your lettuce in some of your more cool season. Cool season salad greens, things of that nature. And I apologize to your dad. I didn't realize that he had put that up there. So I've met your dad. He's a riot. So sorry, Steve. Nicole wants to know a little bit more about the heat sinks that you talked about. Can you talk about how you've created some of those, maybe using rocks or different areas to create heat sinks, Allison?
Yeah, definitely. So different ways to create heat sinks with rocks is a great way. You can actually take buckets of water, paint them black, and then as that absorbs heat during the day, like I said, it'll put that heat off or that energy as heat off at night. And that works really well. But yeah, rocks are a really great way. Black plastic is what I've used a lot if you're trying to do specific to the soil. So that's a good way too. Becky says leggy tomatoes and tomatillos can have their stems buried. I've heard that is a good point. You can plant them
nightshades
horizontally. Yeah. Not a lot of other plants are lucky enough to have that adaptation, but that is a good point.
And I see that someone asks here with a number as their name, when will you transplant the tomatoes to your hoop house?
So when we transplanted them, May 1st, that was always our goal for the tomatoes, which seems outrageous, but it worked really well. We had to cover them with tents, so we made like a tomato tent inside the hoop house, and we put buckets of water in there as well. Like gallon jugs will work for heat sinks as well. You can just put them in between the tomatoes, and really it works really well for any plant.
Excellent.
So May 1st is when we would do those.
Oh, which is coming up soon. MB wants to know what your best winner for veg or flower was.
Best winner. I mean, I love Brandywine tomatoes because they do grow in all of these different shapes, and they're bumpy and they're beautiful and they taste so good. So those are my favorite.
Excellent. And boy, does that sound good right now.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to note that Harvey asked about black plastic on strawberries. Harvey, if you find the right kind of strawberries, you shouldn't have to worry about season extension really on strawberries. We've got a long enough season for those. Mountain Soap wants to know when the best time to plant potatoes, Allie. And have you used 15-gallon buckets? Maybe they mean 5-gallon buckets. I don't know.
The 15 gallons are the trees come in, right?
Oh, I suppose you're right.
Yeah.
Or I think of like cattle supplement tubs.
Totally, yes. And I have used those to varying degrees of success. The key with potatoes is that they really need drainage. So if you use those tubs, make sure to drill holes not only in the bottom but in the sides so that it can drain out as you're watering them, and just really make sure that you're not overwatering your potatoes. Potatoes, a note about them is that they're really frost sensitive. So I would wait until June 1st to plant those. Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Because and then that gives them about 2 weeks still to come up, but make sure that you're covering that early growth if you're going to get one of those frosts that we sometimes get around the 15th to the 21st.
Right, or on the 1st of October, like just
right.
Always, potatoes are really, really sensitive.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Allison. What a treat. And again, those pictures were perfect. Loved them. It is 7:30, and I know folks are going to need to go on and do other things. So if you've got further questions, I remind you to email us at this address, csumgprogram@co.rout.co.us. And also want to make sure that you know what we're doing the next 2 Tuesdays. Next week, Routt County Grows its own part 2. We're going to talk about vegetable gardening. So if you had your appetite whet with Allison's talk, make sure you come and talk about that. Transplanting and insects. We're also going to have Festus join us with a video about how to create ideal soil for a raised garden. I've gotten any number of questions the last week or two in the extension office about that. Tune in next week. And then, of course, our last evening, we're going to talk on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Grab that margarita. Join us for weeds, permaculture, gardening for pollinators, and native plants. So pretty exciting. Look there in the chat. Please friend us on Facebook. You too can share your thoughts, your ideas, pictures of your gardens if you friend us on Facebook, and that is where you too can find out more information about our upcoming educational events. Now, the things that were referenced in Allison's presentation that you're feverishly trying to click on, of course it didn't work, that is available on our website, rout.extension.colostate.edu. Go to that top tab that says Gardening and Horticulture, click on that, and then you'll see as soon as that page opens a click here for Evening with the Master Gardener information. That's probably a page that a lot of you got to us this evening from. That's where tonight's presentation will be posted, and at the bottom of that page is also a resources list that were all the things we referred to last week in terms of climate, soil, seed selection, and all the things from tonight's presentation will be there as well. So have a great evening. Thank you to our presenters tonight. Really appreciate it. Ladies, you did a great job. Thanks to those of you who joined us. Go out, be fruitful, prosperous, and stay well. Hope to see you here next week, and good night.